So I've got a few things to cover today, and it's definitely going to be interactive. So there is a slight delay on LinkedIn Live, and so we'll try our best to get some questions and interaction. Put your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to manage with a couple of screens here. I'm sure it'll be. I think it'll work out. We're going to cover high performance. So high performance is, it's a term that is kind of vague. It's something that we would aspire to, often heard in an athletic context. We'll talk to you about how that applies to companies and organizations, and really any time, but especially we're going to look today at some of the things that you're facing and trying to achieve specifically in this crisis, because it is a little bit different. We're going to talk specifically within there about collaboration and manager support. And we're going to look at the things that drive that, all the time, but again, especially in this environment. We have some research we're doing right now. Ironically, we were starting to do this research already. We were doing a study on how high performance relates to psychological safety. Now, I was talking last week with somebody that was saying that all the research they've seen on psychological safety comes from the safety side first, to look at how does that impact performance. We're kind of coming the other way. If we're cultivating performance, how does that actually impact psychological safety as well? So we'll talk about some research on that and how you can help us finish that study. And we are going to talk about this environment that we're in. And I've left time through the presentation, but also at the end, so that we can get feedback, questions, those sorts of things. And so I'm going to put the first question in the chat online here right now, and we can get started. You're going to find that some of the answers that you get to these things, we're very data driven. So when we talk about collaboration, manager support, they may not be the things that you have typically seen in those categories. And so here's the first thing. I've put this in. Now there is a little bit of a delay here. I've put this on LinkedIn. So how do you define high performance? There's some very specific things that we look for in that, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. And I'll see if anything comes in here on the chat. And I'll kind of keep moving, and I'll come back to the things that you see. So clearly, performance has an element of achieving goals, always, in any type of performance, whether that's corporate or it's athletic. So the big thing we're trying to look at here is, yes, we want to achieve goals. That hasn't gone away. The difference, though, is in high performance, we want to achieve more goals while also having a positive, fulfilling human experience. And I think that's the difference. If we're achieving goals and we're not having a good human experience, that's a problem. And if we're having an amazing human experience, but the team isn't achieving goals, that's also not, exactly an optimal situation. So what we're trying to do is get both. And what I've learned over my career as a COO, CFO, and also a VP sales for a billion-dollar company is that we can have both. And in fact, when you have both, not only do you, perform better, but you also get, you're going to get better results on both fronts, both the goals front and also on the experience front. So there was a couple of comments here about being effective, being efficient. Those are definitely things. And those often come up on the goals side. We look at some things around the human experience. And what we do is we help leaders and teams perform so that they can have a better human experience of work. So let's talk about human experience. The human experience really has a couple of elements. The one we've already studied is employee engagement. What we showed is that the way we look at performance, actually, it impacts engagement to the same degree. The correlations are incredibly high, and it's even predictive. So the way that I'll talk in a second about how we actually cultivate performance, and we have shown that it's actually predictive of employee engagement. The second thing that we look at, though, it's great that we look at engagement. We also want to look at psychological safety. Now, how do these two things relate to each other? Employee engagement a lot of times looks at things like employee retention. It'll look at things like, will I give discretionary effort? We don't think that those things are engagement. And my personal opinion is that is why when you look at global studies on engagement, a lot of times the data isn't moving. I think it's because those things aren't engagement. If you think about discretionary effort, for example, do you get up in the morning wanting to feel discretionary, or do you get up wanting to have a positive, fulfilling state of mind as it pertains to your work? That's engagement. So again, I'll look at that one again. It's on the left side here. It's a positive, fulfilling state of mind as it pertains to your work. That is something from Utrecht University, and they have a thing called the Utrecht Work Engagement Scale. And that's what we used last year to validate our own study, which I'll talk about, our own assessment called the High Performance Index. So liking your job and having this positive, fulfilling state of mind is one piece, but the other thing that we want to look at is psychological safety. Now, a lot of people see the word psychological and think that this is purely about mental health. And we're going to talk deeper about this in a webinar that I'll tell you about later on Thursday. But psychological safety is really about, at its root, are you being treated well as a human? So it's a big part of the human experience. Are you being treated with dignity, respect? Are you being treated fairly? Do you feel like you have integrity in your role? Do you have autonomy in your role? And so these things are really specific things, they're measurable things. And the research that we're doing that I'll talk about, some of the early insights we've had, which have been fairly profound even out of the gate. We're looking here at using another tool, another assessment. We believe this rounds out the full picture of high performance. So if we like our job and we're having this, positive, fulfilling state of mind in our work, and then we also have psychological safety, which means that we're being treated well as humans, that to us is the human experience. So how do we cultivate performance? I know there's a lot of concepts here and we'll have lots of chance for questions on this. The big thing is we first need teams to align and collaborate. So alignment, you're looking at goal setting and things, but we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things in alignment that you may not have thought were actually alignment things. They may have looked like something else. If we're aligned, the next step is then we want teams to collaborate and perform. And so that is where we get into achieving more of the goals. But that's not the full picture. The help people grow side of what we do is really focused on this. If you're familiar with servant leadership, there's a model that was released in the early 70s, which still holds true today. And the test of leadership and if someone's an effective leader in that model is whether you help somebody grow. And we're not talking about somebody getting better at a specific skill or anything like that. What we're talking about in grow is that their whole life got better because they worked with you. And so what we found is that if teams are aligned, if teams are collaborating, no surprise, they'll achieve more goals. We've seen that in practice with our clients. We also then look at if individuals are growing, you'll also be more performant. And if we do all three things, we've shown that the correlations and in some case causation is there for engagement and psychological safety. So what does that mean? There's a lot of times that I've been in debates lots of times about, what comes first. It's kind of that chicken and the egg question of, on one side, we've got performance, then we've got employee engagement, we got psychological safety. Which one causes which? Well, the answer is, we can have a long debate about if performance drives engagement or the other way around, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because what we found is that if we cultivate high performance the way we've aligned teams, help them collaborate, and then the way we help leaders support their teams in terms of helping people grow, we will create high performance, but we will actually get all of these things. We'll achieve more goals, we'll increase engagement, and we will also generate psychological safety for teams. And so it really silences this whole discussion and makes that question almost a little bit pointless of which do you get, the chicken or the egg question. The answer is you can truly get all of them at once. And so let's look at some examples here, and this is where we can get a little bit more interactive. And so I'm inviting you here to look at the chat. And what we're going to do here in a second is we're going to put up, if you're familiar with the game show Family Feud, we're going to do a variation of that. We're going to look at what are some things that we can do to cultivate high performance, specifically in terms of collaboration. So we're a data-driven company, lots of research, and so as you'll probably expect, you're going to see a chart here in a second with lots of questions. So we have 32 questions in what we call our high performance index. And this is where we look at the degree to which leaders are helping teams align, helping teams collaborate, and helping people grow. On the left side, you'll see question 16 has a blue diamond. Now, what that means is that on that question, that is the one that we use to assess at its root, are people in an organization collaborating well with each other? What I invite you to do is take a moment here to look through the 32 questions, and we'll have some time. And I'd like to see some comments coming in the chat. What are some of the questions that you think are going to be highly correlated with this question 16? So in other words, if you look at the other 31 questions here, as you peruse through them, in the chat, put in the number of the question that you think relates to collaboration in a very powerful way. Which ones are going to have the biggest impact? So I'll wait here for a second, give you a chance to look. Some chat in there in the comments. It's really good. We can come back to some of this stuff. If you look at creating high performance during the COVID epidemic, where employees are remote, and large groups are furloughed. Super challenging, and we'll definitely, we can come back to that one. I'll capture that question, hold on to it. But let's get some comments in here as to which questions do you think are going to be the most related to collaboration? And so a lot of times when we think about collaboration, we think about different things we can do to actually help teams in terms of team building, get people rallied around each other, and we really focus on that team element. And so I'll start putting some of the answers up. I mean, it's no surprise that one of the things that's really important in collaboration is that we get other teams to follow through on their commitments to support our team. So if people aren't following through, that's going to undermine collaboration now. It's also going to undermine collaboration in the future. Not surprisingly, the next question is positive workplace relationships. So this is another one that's really tied to collaboration. If you have great relationships, highly intertwined, highly correlated with collaboration. So some of those teamwork things that I talked about are very important, especially if you're getting virtual teams to work together and teams that wouldn't necessarily work together with each other on a frequent basis, or they're not in the same reporting structure, same division, that sort of thing. The next one is really where we start to get towards things that are a little bit different. So this one's around respect. So clearly respect also has elements of psychological safety, and you'll see that come up again in our next version of these questions that we go through. So we have 3 here now. So other teams respect our opinion. We have positive workplace relationships, and other teams are following through on their commitment. No surprise there. What may surprise you is that the first 2 things that actually underpin collaboration are alignment. And so the first one is around the team being aligned and understanding how its work aligns with organizational goals and objectives. And the second one is that people are clear on how their work aligns. So similar question, but we do see differences sometimes when we are working with organizations in terms of whether the team or the individual are aligned. Sometimes the team can be clear on how their work aligns, sometimes the individual, but maybe not both at the same time. Now, if you think about what this really means, if you come back to a situation, think of a situation in your past where collaboration was a challenge, and think in addition about how much easier it is to collaborate if somebody understands the importance of what you're trying to do. So if you go to someone and say, hey, Enrique, I got this really cool project I want to work on, but he can't tie that to the goals of the organization, that's much different than if I come to him and say, I have something I'm trying to do that's closely tied to the overall goals of the organization. Would you be willing to help me? He knows it's important. He's seen it in the communication about goals, and it is something that is going to be vital in terms of getting someone's buy-in. And that's really the big thing. One of the key things in collaboration is just the energy people are willing to put behind the support and the degree to which they're willing to get in and really see this thing through. So many times in my career, both as a coach and as a leader, I've had times where people have, they've committed to do something, but then in fact, when it gets right down to it, they've reprioritized something else that their manager wants them to work on, and collaboration falls apart. So again, I'm going to see what things you notice, and I'll use the delay to my advantage here and just look at I'll give you a couple things that I notice. So what are some things that really surprise you about this list? I know the first time I saw it, I clearly alignment has a role to play in collaboration, but I was really surprised the degree to which alignment is super important. So what are the things that what are some of the things that you see as being different? And I can see Gail here has talked about this as well. If you look at alignment, it is super fundamental, and we've seen that here. So I was surprised that it was the top things in collaboration, but it's, I guess in hindsight, yeah, it's really hard to collaborate if you're not even aligned in the first place. Okay, yeah, so there are some people that have been trying to follow on mobile phones. Hopefully this slide, you can see a little bit better. And what I can try to do the next time is I will put, I'll put a little bit of extra color on what some of the questions are. So the questions I have out there now is, what surprises you about these things? Specifically, the fact that they have such a high impact on collaboration. And the other thing I'd like to know is, what is more challenging during this particular crisis? I think that we'll sprinkle this question in through. So what of these 5 things that are here what is more difficult for you? What are you finding more challenging in this particular situation? So Claire has some questions here about autonomy and empowerment. It's a really interesting one. So we'll talk about that in the next one. We didn't ask some of those things as directly as, I have autonomy, but I'll show you an example here in a second of where autonomy comes into play, because we do have quite a bit in there, and we've probably asked it in just a bit of a different way. Surprised about other team influence? Is one of the comments there. Other teams follow through. And so I'm wondering, from the last comment there from Batul about other teams following through, if that's something that's more difficult now. Yeah, and aligning. So what are some things that people are doing to help teams align and follow through? Those are really good things, especially when people are remote. And someone else had made the comment earlier about, we also have people that, they were on our team and now they've been furloughed or they've been let go. Just reading some of the comments here. Yeah, so clearly communication is much more of a challenge. One of the things that we do with our clients and also for ourselves is we try to do a lot more check-ins. And so the check-in that we use, the format we use works really well. And so what we do is we on a weekly basis as a team, we check in and we talk about, what were your wins of the week? What are you trying to do this week? What are you trying to accomplish? And where do you need help? Pretty standard style of meeting, but when you do it consistently like that, I find that really is helpful to make sure we're clear. The other thing that we do is we have, it's kind of a separate topic from today, but one of the ways we get people aligned is we don't just, in our goal setting method for supporting lines, we don't just map out what the outcomes are and the goals that we're trying to achieve. We also map out something called supporting lines, and clearly that's where the name of the company comes from. And so what we look at is, what are the areas within the company where people need to firmly commit support to each other? So what we don't want to do is get into a situation where someone's making an assumption about the scope of the commitment or trying to understand what they need to do. We want to be super clear. And so once we set the goals for the organization, we then get people to actually make firm commitments of support to each other. That's what we call supporting lines. And when you manage your business with these commitments that people are made, it's much easier to make sure that you've got complete and total alignment. And we're finding that, especially in remote situations, that is working a lot better for teams. So there's a comment here about other teams not following through on commitments. I think, again, coming back to this comment about, how you set the supporting lines to make sure the commitment's there. So the element of a commitment is really important. There are a lot of times where people make an assumption that someone's going to help them. When we actually set a formal supporting line, what we do is it ultimately ends with, we've got a firm scope of work. So we're very clear on what the work is, when it's due, and we also look at how it connects to the goals of the organization. So these are really back to the first two things on the screen here now. And so what we're trying to do is get people to be crystal clear on what they need to do. But then the big difference is we get people to commit that in writing. That could be in your goal planning system. It could be something done in Slack. It could be done in an email. You can do it in Teams. It really doesn't matter where you do it. But the act of putting something in writing, research has shown that makes it much more likely that the goals will be achieved and the commitments will be honored. So I would say that when you're in a remote situation, if you've had a conversation with someone and they're giving you a commitment and they're saying, yes, I will help you, make sure that that's very clear. What do you expect? When do you expect it? Get it in an email. If you can get it actually written down, it's less about trying to, call somebody out if they don't do it. It's more about setting them up for success and making sure they're likely to help you from the outset. So get those things in writing. It makes a massive difference. Okay, let's shift to the next one. And I'll try to help out the people who are on phones a little more. We're going to look as well at how managers support their teams. And so when I talk about manager support, what are the elements of manager support? I'm going to put this in the chat here as well. I think if we asked everybody that was on the call here what they mean by manager support, there's going to be a number of different elements to that. So if we think about the elements of manager support, just maybe drop in the chat here what some of the things are that you'd be thinking about. And so we have the same exercise. This time, the question that we have is, I have the support I need from my manager to do what's expected of me. And what we're going to do is try to come up with what we think some of the biggest things are that would be support that people want from their manager. And so for the people on phones, we have a number of questions about alignment. So we look at things like how clear, can people see how their work aligns with goals of the organization? We have some things in there that are specific to role. So we want people to be clear on the big strategic priorities they have. We also want them to be very clear on the balance of their role. I'll give you an example of that. So if you're let's say you're in finance, there might be something around a big round of financing or something like that that you need to do that would be a strategic priority for the organization. Closing the books and some of the other daily tasks are really important, but they more round out your role. They may not show up in the goals of the company. And I guess, if you're a company where closing the books effectively shows up in the goals, and you probably have much bigger issues on the finance front than hopefully most companies do. We look at whether leaders communicate a vision. We look at if the organization has really aligned its goals with that vision and with its overall mission. One of the big ones we look at is, are managers living the values and principles of the organization? So lots of companies will have values on the website and they'll use it in recruiting and other things, but do people actually live those values? That's often a very different thing. So there's a few things in here in the chat around manager support. So thank you for putting them in. So Tanisha talks about good rapport relationship, good and clear communications. Yeah, emotional intelligence. I agree, Brittany. Tanisha then comes in as well with honest and frequent feedback. So you can see here, some people are actually, they've got multiple things. I mean, anybody has multiple things that they would need. So what's very important, we're a data-driven company, and we like looking at what are the most important things that people need. And I'll start going through some of those here. So we talked about some of the alignment things. We've covered collaboration. Looking here at the help people grow part, we talk about regular performance conversations, regular feedback from both manager and colleagues. We look at recognition. We look at things around, can you have candid conversations about your career, even if your goals mean that you have to leave the organization to do it? And do you have opportunities for learning, development, to develop skills related to your interests and ultimately to move your career forward? So this is the essence of some of the questions. And if you're on your phone, you can just put yours in. Chances are some of the things that you'd look for in a manager, we have somewhere on this board. And I'll come back to the autonomy question that was raised earlier. So here's one way we come at autonomy. The fifth answer, and this is all again based on correlations between the high performance index and work engagement. So this is one of the top 5 things that are related to manager support. This one also is the biggest driver of work engagement, and we saw that it was predictive. I'm satisfied with my level of involvement in a company's goal setting process. So I knew again that was important. And if you think about autonomy, this is a big one, because what you're talking about here is getting people involved in defining their how. In our experience, leaders are very good at coming up with the objectives. Where's the company trying to go? They're also very strong at looking at, how would we prove that we got there? Typically, leaders are going to get those things right based on our experience with clients. Where leaders often are way off the mark is on defining the work. And I think that's because they shouldn't know the how. The how is really important, and this is where you want to bring people in. So you talk about autonomy. Would you rather have somebody tell you, here's the goal, and here's exactly how I think you should support it, and here's the work you should do? Or do you want to set goals the way we do, which is we define the objectives, then we bring in the employees to come tell us how they think we should do it? So again, the supporting lines are the work. So when we talk about setting these commitments of work between different groups and these commitments between different teams, it underpins alignment. But the way we do it, by bringing the company in, you are fostering empowerment because people are part of the process. And I think that's why in our data we see that that's so impactful on engagement. So some more questions coming in here. I'll come back to these in a second. So we're talking about, productivity might suffer in the short term. That's definitely something we want a manager to acknowledge. I think that's important. I have seen research that shows that, on the whole, a lot of people are now starting to be able to function. I saw data last week from Colliers. It said that 75% of employees are at least as productive or even more productive at home than they were before. And the majority of people are saying they're getting the support they need from their manager. So one of the things we talked about was communication. Communication is really challenging, and I would encourage leaders to have more frequent one-on-ones than they maybe have had before, more frequent check-ins, and try to use, there's so many tools out there now that we're all using to collaborate. I've got accounts now for Zoom and Teams and Slack. I feel like I have pretty much every collaboration tool going. One of the big things is try to use video. Video is a huge, huge thing, and definitely voice if you can't do video. It just gives you a bit more. There's 2 types of communication. One is the message you're delivering, but the other one is trying to understand for the person you're talking to what's going on for them. And so I think that's where video and voice will come in and play a big role for you. The other thing we want to look at is whether your direct manager respects you. Is it We talked about respect as well in the collaboration. And we also find in our data, if you look at where this question is, it's actually question 10 over here under the alignment question. So you'll see a theme here of alignment. Another one around alignment is job performance. So I want my job performance to be assessed fairly. And so this is also, this one's both alignment and help people grow, because we want to be clear on expectations from the beginning. And then we also want to make sure that at the end, we're coming back and we're getting a good, getting a good and fair review. It's not, there's not a whole bunch of new criteria that are being put in front of us. So what we want to do is look at all of these elements as being really critical elements of manager support. And again, the performance review, please, when you do those in this environment, make sure you're doing them by video whenever possible. It makes such a difference. So that leaves number one, and this comes back again to alignment, but it's a different type of alignment. I said some of these answers may surprise you. This one will definitely surprise some of you. The number one element of manager support is we want the manager to truly live the organization's values and principles. So again, lots of companies we work with either haven't defined values and principles, or else they put them on the website, which is good, or it's on a brochure at reception, but people don't actually live them. I'll give you an example. I used to be on a sales team where we talked about one of our company values being respecting all the people on the team. Well, the reality was, if you were someone that was really doing well as a salesperson, you could get away with not respecting people. You could be hitting your number and there's a whole trail of records behind you. And I don't think that's what the website said was our value. So it's really important here that the manager truly lives the values and principles. So again, we'll do the same exercise. What do you find surprising about this list? And also, what is it that's more challenging in this crisis environment that we're all in? So I'm just looking through some of the chat here. Rob talks about true leaders providing a type of support that allows people to safely fail. Well, that's a really interesting one. And that comes back again to autonomy. So one of the things that we're doing is we're showing right now, I'll talk about our research. One of the things we're looking at is, in an environment of high anxiety, how do these things relate to psychological safety? And we're finding that they really matter a lot. And that's a big one. People feeling like they can safely fail is critically important, or else they're going to be apprehensive. And so one of the things, I coach minor hockey, and one of the things we had this year with our team was exactly it. It's like, you're not going to make a perfect play every time, but we want you to go for it. Because if you're playing hesitant, you're trying to decide whether you should go or not, you kind of get caught in between. And the same thing happens at work. We want people to lean in and be really, be aggressive. We want them to be smart, make good decisions, but they're not always going to make the decisions. And I don't know about you, but not everything I do works out perfectly. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to do to try to help people feel like, they do have that safety. And we're seeing that in our data. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, but I'm also going to keep moving here, just conscious of time. So one of the things you notice is that out of the 10 different things, 9 of them related to alignment. There was a lot of things in there around making sure that people are on the same page, making sure people are following through on commitments, making sure that the expectations are set not just for performance and what we need to achieve, but also what are acceptable behaviors here. That is another element of alignment. And so high performance is absolutely fundamentally based on alignment, as some of the people had made earlier. And I'm glad to see that at least one person here, Batul, is satisfied with her level of involvement, and that's fantastic. So I want to pose this question. There's some research out there lately that suggests that lots of organizations may not know whether teams are aligned. We know it's very important. And a lot of organizations are right now in an environment they've never been in. So 73% of organizations, according to a recent Mercer study, have begun execution of a business continuity plan. There's lots of companies that are just trying to hang on. They're trying to navigate this environment. That number is even higher now, because more people, in the last time this data was run, would have been focused on trying to get a plan. More companies now are in execution mode. But the challenge is, we've never been here before. This is a whole new environment that we're in. And 2 weeks ago, from the Kaiser Family Foundation, there was a study that showed that 45% of individuals are reporting negative mental health impacts. So, and again, I would say that number's higher because some people may not recognize it and other people may not want to say it in a survey. The challenge I have, though, is that, and the challenge we all have, is I believe we're data driven, and it doesn't have to be, we can very efficiently and effectively collect data, but only 13% of companies are doing that. And so what we're concerned about here is we have a number of companies that are out, operating a brand new plan in an environment we've never been in a state of heightened employee anxiety. And this to me is very concerning. And a lot of companies we work with are very hesitant to run any kind of big surveys or these sorts of things. We see it the opposite. We think that whatever is going on in your organization right now, it's super important to know it. And in our experience, people on teams or for the whole organization are happy to fill out different questionnaires or different surveys or things if they believe that something's going to be done with it. And so surely in this environment, we are going to be able to get 15 minutes of people's time or 10 minutes of people's time to get their feedback and really get precise about exactly what kind of support that they need. And again, in the spirit of empowerment, we also believe in bringing the employees in once you get that data back to help craft the solutions because they're experts on what they need. So let's bring this together and we'll show you how we use data to actually then cultivate high performance. So I'm not going to get super pitchy here. I just want to give you an overview of how we do it. This is one approach. So we talked earlier about how we help teams align and collaborate, and we also want to help people grow. And so how would we know when we're not doing that? So this is the questions that we showed earlier in a high performance index. We use those to assess where some of these elements may not be in place and where some of the things might be breaking down. We have two different ways we do this. We have a team survey. We have a leader evaluation, which is free. That's where a leader predicts what their team would say. And then we have an employee survey where we actually go get the results. We also have individual assessments. So a leader can come in and fill out 20 questions where they self-assess their own leadership capabilities. And then we can run that as a 360. The self-assessment is free, just like the leader evaluation. We're very big on making sure that some of the tools that we have are free so that, you know, if your organization isn't necessarily running some big survey or having a program, you can still get some of the help you need right out of the gate. We then connect that to our framework. I also am big on whatever tools you use, whatever vendors you're working with. I think it's really important to not just get data, but also find something where there's solutions that are tied to that data. I've had cases where, you know, you'll come in and you get someone that'll run an engagement survey, and then after that, there's no support. When you try to figure out what to do about it, they're nowhere to be found. So we come in, we do coaching workshops for organizations. We also do coaching and what we call leadership practicums for individuals. And a practicum is we'll actually come in and we'll watch people in action because we believe that that skill application is super important. So we watch someone do a one-on-one, give them feedback right after on how they did. And then all of this is underpinned by an e-learning system. So again, whatever system you're using, make sure you have a way to connect your data that you get to the action. And so what we do is once we get the results, we also recommend that you only pick one or two things. And again, whatever engagement surveys, whatever tools you're using, it's likely fine. Find one or two things that you need to work on, then take action and do the cycle again. And that's really the big thing. You want to get into this cycle of data-driven, and you know, data drives action, and then you check and see if you actually, you know, did we move the needle? Did we get results? And so let's have a look at our comprehensive survey. So I just want to frame up how we sort of do how our index and framework go together. So you'll get to see how you can actually run this. So one of the things we were struggling with was how can we get people to get more data in an environment where a lot of, you know, HR teams and organizations either don't have the money or don't have the bandwidth right now to run a survey. So one of the things we've done is if a leader wants to actually run a comprehensive survey where they look at performance, they can assess psychological safety in this environment of heightened anxiety, and they can also run a study where they collect work engagement information. We came up with a free offering. So if a leader or a team wants to do this, they can just do it on their own, request the data, and right now it's totally free. So what is in this assessment? We look at our elements of align, collaborate, and grow. We've also brought in a highly validated, robust model from a group called Guarding Minds at Work. They have 13 elements of psychological safety. And this actually underpins, it's a Canadian company, but you know, humans are similar in a lot of different places as it pertains to psychological safety. This actually underpins a Canadian standard for workplace mental health and safety. So this is a very robust model. And what we do is we pair that with the supporting lines questions. And we also bring in the Utrecht Work Engagement Scale. So this is the assessment of, do I have a positive, fulfilling state of mind as it pertains to my work? These three together, what we're seeing is there's incredible interrelation here. And there are some things in the Guarding Minds questions that start to get into some of these really specific questions about autonomy. And that's where we can see which ones relate back to the supporting lines ones. So what have we seen so far? At this point, we're about halfway through. And one of the things that we want to look at, I'm seeing some of the things here about, you know, people do want to see ways that they can ask questions of people during this environment. So right now, if you have a team of even 8 people and you want to run this survey, you can run it, and I'll give you the information here in a second as how you can take it. It's totally free. We even give you a debrief. What we've seen so far is that we are seeing incredibly strong correlations on both psychological safety and employee engagement. We saw employee engagement, we actually showed predictive patterns for that when we did the validation last time. What we're seeing now is incredible correlations, and I'm talking north of 70%. Once you start, anything over 30% is significant. Once you get above 70%, you start approaching 80%, things start to become the same thing. It's not even correlation anymore. And so some of the elements that make teams the most performant, if we do them in a very specific way, as I mentioned earlier, we'll actually cultivate performance, psychological safety, and engagement at the same time. Very powerful, very efficient, and it simplifies the leader's to-do list. I mean, a lot of leaders are thinking about these as different things, and we're starting to see that they are absolutely not different things. You don't have to have a checklist that has, achieve goals, be efficient, be effective, think about psychological safety, and I got to engage my team. Those are all, what we're seeing is that those are all the same thing based on the same core set of leadership principles. Also, we're seeing an alignment and collaboration are important, especially there's some specific elements that are coming through. So people definitely want to be involved in planning. That has stayed from our prior study. So we're seeing that be the same. And as people have mentioned, that's more challenging. That's more challenging now. People want to understand how their work aligns with organizational goals and objectives. Again, that can be more challenging in this environment. So you have to be very deliberate about making sure people see how their work connects. The other thing we want to see is how the organization's goals are aligned with overall mission and vision. So meaning of work is very important. The fact that what you're doing every day is super critical, and you can see how it relates to the work of the organization. That is something that you're going to want to make sure that you're very deliberate about. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a leader this week about a person on her team was frustrated with taking minutes in meetings. And so one of the things that was interesting about that was that the minutes that were being kept, this is in a healthcare context, the minutes that are being kept were actually helping hundreds of other people know what was happening in these key update meetings. So by connecting the importance of accurate, precise, and getting the minutes out rapidly, helping someone understand the role that was having in a healthcare crisis was very important. The person found that to be inspiring. So it's very important to be deliberate about connecting it. Don't expect your team to be connecting these things themselves and understanding how their work fits in. Take that extra step, especially in this environment, to do it. It's super empowering, and it's going to make your team more performant as well. The thing that surprised me is help people grow. We know that it's important, but in our last study, help people grow, the elements to help people grow were less correlated with employee engagement. We're seeing that change. And not only are we seeing these elements that are on the screen here now specifically have a much higher, like 50% higher correlation with work engagement, they're also very strongly correlated with psychological safety. And so I could see how these things demonstrate respect, and they make someone feel psychologically safe because someone has a genuine interest in their development, and they're getting to do learning and development that's really tied to what they want to do, their career, the skills that they want to drive. But right now in this environment, it does seem like there's a significant increase in the importance of this. And so we don't know for sure that it's purely because of this environment, but the difference is so startling versus our last study that it is definitely something that we want further inquiry around. So in this environment, it would make sense that people might be more concerned about some of these things, given that they're not necessarily in front of you every day. And so I don't know if these are things that you're seeing as well, but I'm trying to monitor the chat here as well. It'd be great to get your feedback on, is they help people grow? Are these elements things that you're seeing people ask about more? And if so, what things are you doing about it? Because again, you've seen Tiana on my team here in the chat. One of the things we're constantly doing at our one-on-ones, the first question we check in on is wins. And the second one is, what have you done in the past, week or two, however long it's been since our one-on-one, what have you done in the past week or two to look at moving forward on your development goals? So make this front and center. I think this is also a really important one. And our data, again, this is coming back at this point, early returns, but it's north of 70%. So this is something that's going to be very, very important as we stay in this protracted environment and people are concerned about maybe it's a lack of face time impacting their career. Maybe it's just harder to get development opportunities. Maybe some people are just not as comfortable speaking up through the different communication channels we have now, and they'd rather have that conversation in person. We're not exactly sure because a lot of times when we get these, we run these surveys, we're getting as many questions as answers. But what I can tell you is that these elements of employee growth and development are much more important than they were in the past, and certainly when we did this study a year ago. And yeah, Gail, Gail and Erica here are talking about how it's super important to make sure you're going to do something about this. If you run a survey and you're not going to do anything with it and people see no action, I would say don't waste your time. This is really not about employees getting or the leaders getting a bunch of data. This is really about taking action. Just pick one or two things. So if we get the data here, one of the things that I would do, and we have a debrief with a company this week, is we're gonna have a conversation about help people grow. What exactly is it that employees want to see? What are they concerned about? What are they not getting that they want to see? We're going to go into this in more detail on Thursday if you want to join us. 9 a.m. Pacific, we've got a great panel. I'm hosting a discussion where we're going to talk about why do great leaders care about psychological safety. We're going to unpack more with some experts about what psychological safety is and why some of the things that we're seeing about performance make sense given their backgrounds and given their expertise. So on our website at supportinglines.com, you can go there and find more information about this webinar. We'd be happy to have you join. We've got a lot of people joining, and it's a great list. So I think some of the questions we're going to get from the group might be better than the ones I'm going to ask myself. So I'm looking forward to that. Here's the link to the comprehensive survey. The QR code on your phone probably won't work if you're on your phone, but maybe just take a screenshot. All the information on this is on supportinglines.com. Again, you got 3 assessments. It takes your team 15 minutes to fill it out. You don't need, you don't need to go to anybody for approval or anything else. These are your opinions. So if you go and get your team to fill this out using their work email address, let us know that you've done that. We will run a report. You have to have at least 5 people to get the team report. We will run the report. We will also give you a complimentary debrief. And some of those I'll be doing myself. We also have some other amazing coaches that will be helping out. But I highly encourage you to do this. The results that we're seeing from this are really transforming the way that teams are working in this environment. And it's completely free. These have never been offered together before. And there's no limit. You can run this for a 500-person company as well if you want. So please let us know if you'd be interested in getting some more information for either teams, individuals, or the whole organization. If you want to run this just for yourself, you can do it, and we'll send you a copy of your results. And if it's a team, we can support you with a debrief. So one of the things we sent out as the homework was a thought exchange. If you haven't participated in it, here was the question that we had sent. I'm gonna pick up some of these questions here in a second. But first, I'll give you a chance, if you haven't done it, to go do it. You can scan the QR code, or if you're on your phone, go to thoughtexchange.com, or you can use the Thought Exchange app. And the exchange that you want to join is 912-09894. And I'll put that in the chat here. And so what a thought exchange is that you'll put in the answer to this question, and then you'll rate other people's answers. And that helps us prioritize what people want to talk about. And so we'll get to some of these today, but we can also, I can also make this available afterwards, and I can get Enrique to send around what the final results were to all the people that have registered. So thoughtexchange.com, the code is 912-092-894. And so what I'll do now is, as we're going, as the thought exchange is coming up, I will invite you to ask any other questions that you have. And I'm going to go in here now and just have a look at the thought exchange. We do have some more people that had filled it out. The first question that was in there was around getting to your comfort zone and people having insecurity around virtual communication and connection. So, as a leader, that is much more challenging, especially if your style is very engaging and you like to be, in the same place as somebody. I prefer to be in the office. I do like when I have something to focus on, doing some things, at home. If I need to do some heads down work, that sort of thing. But what are some of the things to get over your comfort zone? I think the biggest thing is if you're really struggling with that, err on the side of video. I think Slack, email, texting, they're all quick and they're helpful, but I just think nothing beats a phone call. Maybe it's because maybe I'm showing my age here, but phone calls, you can, through Slack, if you've got the enterprise version of it, you can actually share your screen, you can connect live. We've also done things where sometimes we just work in and we just open a Zoom and we're just working in the same place. Like when there's nothing going on, it's just almost like we're sitting next to each other. So try some different things. There's tons of information online as well. But the biggest thing is, if you're concerned about, the way you're showing up virtually in your communications, err on the side of video and phone calls. If you're not comfortable with that, maybe Slack's your thing. But the challenge with written stuff is it's hard to get that tone. Thanks, Adam and Christina. I can see here you got some comments here. I appreciate the comment about improving the experience at work. We definitely are seeing that we are doing that for our companies. And I'm going to hit refresh here and see if we've got any changes. So the next one that came up was around change. So things are changing so quickly, we need to be flexible and adapt. And thanks, Patul. I really appreciate that feedback. That the sharing of our data is dynamic. So this one's totally dynamic because it's real time. So things are changing quickly. Need to be flexible and adapt. So one of the biggest things is that I was reading 9 Lies About Work by Marcus Buckingham, and one of the things that was in there, they talked about how the best plan is really just something where you've looked at what do you think it is that we need to do based on recent history. And of course, we had set a bunch of plans, got all the objectives laid out, mapped out all the supporting lines, everyone's happy, and then, the earth moved. So I think the biggest thing is that you have to be willing to adapt quickly and pivot, and having this absolute clarity. You can't pivot quickly without alignment. You can't pivot quickly without making sure that people in your organization are completely on the same page with each other. And so, we think that if teams want to adapt quickly, there is a way to do it. One thing we would say is that if you're shifting from growth mode to business continuity mode, have fewer goals. Define what business continuity looks like, and then really map out for people exactly what the commitments are that underpin that business continuity. I know other people. One of my neighbors works at a company where they're trying to figure out how do they quadruple production in record time, because they're a healthcare company, and right now their products are in incredible demand. So that's a different problem, but again, it's a pivot. So some of the other things you might have had as your goals and initiatives before that, they might be less relevant now. So you have to give your teams the ability to pivot, look at what's most important right now, but then really, again, make sure you take the time to hammer out those commitments to support. Otherwise, what's going to happen, especially in a changing dynamic environment, is it's going to be even harder for you to have people on the same page and for them to collaborate. See a comment there from Gail. Thank you, Gail. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. We definitely are data rich, if nothing else. Looking at time here, I got time for probably one more off the thought exchange. So I'll hit refresh here one more time. The next one I'm seeing, and I can share this as a PDF with Enrique so he can send it out and people can see. And then if when we send it out, if you have any questions about it, just shoot me an email. I'll put my email address up here in a second. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and see how we can help you with any one of these. And then the other one is just keeping everyone engaged to move the business forward. Well, as we've seen today, that's a great one to have come up, because what we've seen is if we focused on getting the teams aligned, we focus on having the teams collaborate, and then we focus on helping people grow, people will be engaged. We're going to promote psychological safety. And at the same time, of course, we're going to move the business forward. We're going to achieve our goals. I'd encourage everyone to go to our site and take the leader evaluation, or you can do the leader self-assessment if you want to get some data about your exact situation. And of course, we talked earlier about the comprehensive survey, so I'll put the link to that up again. So as we come to a close, I'd invite you to think about what is one immediate action you can take for your own leadership or for your team to cultivate high performance during this crisis. I'll leave you with that question. What immediate action can you take to cultivate high performance in a crisis? I think we answered all the different questions that we had set out to at the beginning. We talked about high performance culture. We talked about collaboration and manager support, and hopefully some of the things that we had provoked some thought and some insight. If you want to participate in the comprehensive survey, I'll put that up here again. I'll thank you for participation. I really appreciate the interaction in the chat. And please follow us on LinkedIn. And if you want to take this comprehensive survey, we'd be really happy if you did. It's going to give you great insight, and it's going to help us get to the necessary level of data so we can round out our study and publish some of these results in a truly validated format. So with that, I will wrap and turn it back over to you, Enrique. Thanks, everybody.